Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High-impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Mack Story.
Hello, and thanks for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast today. Today, I continue my 30-part series on my book, Blue Collar Leadership and Culture, the 5 components for building high-performance teams. So I shared with you back in part 6, chapter 6, about the transformation equation, that first component of the 5 components. The first one was leadership development. We're still talking about leadership development. Today, we're on chapter 9. Chapter 9 is titled Leadership Development Never Ends. It never ends. You never get there. You can never learn it all. And even if you could, you still wouldn't know it all because every day is different. Every situation is different. Every person is different. And they're going to be different tomorrow than they are today. If you could snap your fingers in your organization, instantly the culture is perfect. Everyone is perfect at this moment. You walk in at 8 a.m. Monday morning, you wave a magic wand, the culture is perfect. It's going to start changing as soon as people start talking, sharing stories, sharing experiences, having issues, having problems. Then they go home. They all go to a different home. They all have different experiences at that home. Some things are good. Some things are not so good. And that impacts them. When they come back on Tuesday, everybody's going to be different to some degree because of the experiences they had or saw. It's just the way life is. So the subtitle of chapter 9, Leadership Development Never Ends, the subtitle is The Language of Leadership is Extremely Dynamic and Complex. The definition is simple. Leadership's influence. But the language of leadership is extremely dynamic and complex. So I mentioned my wife, Rhea, to you last time, and I talk about her quite frequently. We do everything we do together. We speak and teach on leadership development, personal growth all over the country. I focus on blue-collar industries. Rhea's focus is for leadership development for women. But regardless of who we're speaking to, we usually still speak together because it actually is more interesting for the audience. I'm blue collar. She's more white collar. I talk like I'm from the country. She doesn't. She's squared away. I am from the country. So is she, but she doesn't talk like I do. We're husband and wife, male and female. But I want to share a quote with you from Rhea. Rhea says this: leadership is one of the most misunderstood words in the professional world, and perhaps in the personal development world. What she's talking about is how dynamic and complex it is. That's what makes it hard to understand. The other thing is people talk about it because people are different. They talk about it in so many different ways. But people who truly understand leadership talk about it in the same way because they're talking about principles. That's why if you read a lot of real leadership books, you'll be like, there's nothing new in this book. There's nothing new in this book. This book's just like the other book. That's because they're talking about principles. What's different and new is the story of how we've applied those principles. You can read from John Maxwell, one of the top leadership gurus in the world. You can read when he talks about sacrifice, or you can get my Defining Influence book where I write and talk about sacrifice. The principle is going to be the same. But the story that John tells you to help influence you, to help you understand what it meant for him in his life to sacrifice, is going to be different than the story that I tell you, or that Rhea tells you, or that any other person tells you I could ask you, what does it mean to you? How have you sacrificed in your life? As soon as you start telling me a story, it's your story. That's what's different, is how we've applied the principles. Like the principle of sacrifice, you have to give up to go up. Then you have to give up more to stay there. And if you want to help others climb higher, you got to give up even more for someone else. Those are the principles related to sacrifice. So the language of leadership is extremely dynamic and complex. Not because leadership principles are hard to understand, but because of the endless number of variables that impact how our attempts at influence are perceived and received. We'll say it again. The language of leadership is extremely dynamic and complex. And then this is the key part. Not because leadership principles are hard to understand, but for this reason right here. There's an endless number of variables that impact how our attempts at influence are perceived and received. How do people see what we're saying? How do they receive what we're saying? So, and I talk about this a ton in my book, Defining Influence. A lot of the stuff I'm talking about here, I dive deep into in that book. That's why I recommended it a couple of episodes ago. If you want to deep dive into truly understanding the stuff that I'm speaking about here, the point in this book, in Blue Collar Leadership and Culture, is to introduce you to this content so that hopefully you want to dive deeper and you want to grow and develop your team, help them understand this stuff. If you teach them what's in the culture book and then you teach them what's in the other books that I'm referencing in there, you're going to have a team with such a high degree of understanding. You can't help but have a high impact culture and a high performance team getting amazing results. That's a principle. You can't grow and develop people without getting better results. But I don't know why a lot of people don't do it. They just take what they can get. I guess they're happy with where they're at in life, but that's not high impact leadership. So what one person perceives as positive may be perceived as negative by another person at the very same moment. That's where it gets complicated. When you're building trust with one person, you could be creating distrust with another at the exact same moment. And this is because different people see things differently and they have different values. The different values is the key point. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a high impact leader. You read this culture book, or you hear me speak, you get me to come into your organization. You've never done this before. You tell everybody on your team, Tuesday morning, 8 o'clock, we're going to have a half-day workshop with Mack and Ria. They're going to come in and talk to us about leadership development. And I've purchased a bunch of their books, and we're going to do book studies, and they're going to introduce you to this content, and we're going to go down the path, and you cast your vision kind of thing, and this is the start of it. Maybe you've never done it before. Maybe you've done it a bunch of times, but let's say you've never done it before in my little scenario. Ria and I come in, we start speaking and talking. A lot of times, first thing I notice is I can feel it. I can feel who's kind of open. I can kind of tell who's reserved. And I can kind of tell who don't want to be there. It's kind of obvious. And as I start talking, I'm sharing these kind of principles. I start telling my stories. I see some people will set up and take a good posture. They'll sit up tall in their chair. They'll flip open their notes. They'll start taking notes. You can just see it in their face. They're engaged. They're bought in. They're buying in. And then there's other folks rolling their eyes, whispering to the neighbor next sitting next to them, crossing their arms, leaned back. They can't wait to get out of the room. Now, I'm the same exact person saying the same exact thing, and that both of these people I just described are hearing it at the exact same moment. So what's the difference? This is what makes it complicated. It's their values. One person is aligned and values what I have to say. They're aligned with the principles that I'm talking about. Another person could care less what I'm talking about. They're not aligned. And I'll actually ask when I'm speaking from the stage, because I know this is happening, but I want to teach people in the room that I know this is happening. They also know it's happening. They know who's on board and who's not. They can tell. They know who says what at break or at lunch. They know about the side conversations. They know who's on board, who's not. It's just obvious. But I want them to know that I know it and I know why, and it's okay. Life's going to be fine. So I'll ask them, what would cause that to happen? I tell them the same little scenario that I told you just now. And I say, why? Why would that happen? And it comes down to what I've touched on already: motivation and manipulation. The person who's on board feels motivated. Maybe they have a good relationship with the boss who told them to come in there and to cast the vision. So they felt motivated. For whatever reason, they feel motivated because they are in alignment with what I'm talking about. The people who don't like it, they don't feel motivated. They feel manipulated. Maybe they feel like the boss who told them to come in there is trying to manipulate them to be something they don't want to be. Maybe they think I'm trying to manipulate them to be something they don't want to be. It doesn't matter why. What matters is they feel manipulated compared to the people who feel motivated. And that's the path we have to go down to transform the culture. We've got to have the courage to say, this is who we are. This is who we want to become. You're welcome to join us. If you don't want to, we're going to miss you at some point. Whether you leave us or we leave you, if you don't get on board, if you don't value these high-level, timeless, tested principles, live them and apply them, we're going to love you, but we're going to miss you. You're just not going to fit in. But until you cast the vision and start teaching, people they don't even know what that is. So let's talk about it. I've touched on this before, but trust is the foundation of leadership. Remember, the definition of leadership is influence. Trust is the foundation of influence. And I say authentic influence to make sure you really understand what I'm talking about, not artificial influence. Trust is the foundation of leadership, and it's based on two components: character and competency. And research reveals, multiple research studies have revealed, and they vary slightly, but I use the number 87. Research reveals that 87% of our influence is based on our character, and only 13% on our competency. And if you read the different studies or check them out, you usually see 87 to 90% they agree is related to character. 10 to 13% is based on our competency. But see, most leaders and most organizations, most of them don't do anything related to character as far as development. Most of them spend 100% of their time based on developing people's competency. So most leaders, most organizations spend 100% of their leadership development time and resources on the component that's only responsible for 13% of our influence. And you have to do that. I'm not saying don't do it. You have to have the competency. What I'm inviting you to understand is our influence as individuals and as an organization in our community and in society is based primarily on our character. Knowing how to do the job is not what's going to, your team knowing how to do their job, whatever that is, it's not going to make you the sought after employer of choice. It's the character of those people who know how to do their job that's going to either attract top talent or repel top talent. You see, character multiplies your competency. Character leverages your competency. You've got to have the competency, but you don't have to have the character. That's a choice. The character of the people in an organization is what separates it from the other organizations. Because any organization in business that's actually doing the work, the business, or providing the service, or creating, manufacturing a product, whatever it's doing, if you're actually able to do that and you're in business, you have the competency. what's going to separate you is the character. Character of the leaders, character of the people. And without trust, there will be no authentic influence. Without trust, there will be no authentic influence. You can have all kind of artificial influence without trust. It happens every day in every organization. People following a boss because they have to, not because they want to. And what I try to teach those folks is you only have to because you're not developing yourself. If you developed yourself, you'd have options, and one of them would be to fire the bad boss. Find you a better boss. That's what I call leadership truth. A lot of people don't like to hear it, but that's the truth. If you're following a bad boss, it's because you're not leading yourself well. You don't have options. If you had options, you wouldn't be following the bad boss. You'd fire them and find a new boss. So we talked about trust as the foundation of leadership or authentic influence. And I kind of gave you the scenario of when I'm speaking. Some people buy in, some people don't buy in. Some people feel manipulated, some people feel motivated. And the reason is intention, our intention is the foundation of trust. And again, I break this all down in my Defining Influence book. I go deep into this stuff, talking about trust, motivation, and manipulation. Intention is the foundation of trust. Intention is about motivation and manipulation, as I've just said. If someone believes there is mutual benefit, they feel motivated, and trust is built. If they feel they're not benefiting, then they feel manipulated, and distrust is created. The example I gave when I'm speaking and teaching on leadership, and I go into an organization, the leader made everybody come into the room. He didn't make them, but he says, hey, everybody's got to be there. So if you're not there, you may not have a job, right? So the leader says, everybody come to this training. Some people are going to feel motivated. Some are going to feel manipulated. Some people I'm going to build trust with. Some people I'm going to build distrust with. Some people may trust me, but they still don't trust their leader because the stuff I start talking about, they realize real quick the leader's not doing this stuff. So they may even feel more manipulated because the leader's not modeling the stuff. They feel like the leader's bringing me in to tell them, you need to do this, but the leader doesn't have to do it. That may be the story they tell themselves, especially when you first begin. That's why it's so important to use the culture book, Blue Collar Leadership and Culture, to cast the vision. Before you start going in and really diving deep, tell everyone what it's about, why we're doing it. I got to get in alignment just as much as you do. Really, I got to get in it more because everybody's watching me. I'm the leader, the formal leader. Aligning everyone behind proven, unifying leadership principles is the key to avoiding chaos and creating a high-impact culture. Remember, chaos is what you get when all 5 of the components of the transformation equation are missing. When you don't have leadership development, you don't have buy-in, you don't have a unifying purpose, you don't have competency relative to leadership development, character development, and then you're not executing on developing people relative. Remember, I'm talking about culture, not execution and getting the job done. Unless you consider the job is developing people, then absolutely, that's what I'm talking about. Executing, developing people at all levels, in all areas. So Ria's got a great book that relates to leadership development. It's called Leadership Gems. She's got 2 versions. She has Leadership Gems for women, and then a basic book called Leadership Gems, which is for everybody. They're very, very similar. You don't need both books. If you're a woman or you're buying it for a woman, you want Leadership Gems. If you're a man, you want Leadership Gems. But also, if you're a woman, you could get Leadership Gems, but you should get Leadership Gems for women. Some of the chapters are almost identical, but some of the stories are slightly different. The one for women, Ria kind of focuses more on women, on moms and sisters and that sort of stuff. when she's talking about the stories. So you can go to riastory.com/download, and you can download a free excerpt from these books. Leadership Gems is just share some of the titles. It's about being authentic, being proactive, being responsible, being positive, being resilient, being courageous, being purpose-driven, passionate, confident, realistic, disciplined, inspired, motivational. All these are chapter titles. Being humble, teachable, curious, trustworthy, being transparent, forgiving, and it's all related in the context of leadership, leading other people. So that's a resource that I mentioned in this chapter. At the end of the chapter, these chapters where I reference you to another book to dive deeper, there's just 2 lines at the end of the actual chapter in my book, A Blue Collar Leadership and Culture, where I reference you to the website or web address where you can learn a little bit about that additional resource to take you deeper. So I hope you check that out. So I'm going to leave you with a quote today by, I think you say her name, Ayn Rand. It's spelled Aynrand. Looks like Ann. I don't know how to say it exactly. That part doesn't matter. What matters is this quote I got from reading one of her books. And I learned from all kind of people. You may see some of the people who I share a quote from, you may think, I don't like that person. I may not like them either. I may not even know them. What I know is the quote that I'm sharing, it's got some good stuff in it. I read and learn from all kind of people. I don't care, Republican, Democrat, black, white, Chinese. I don't care. Religious, not religious. Don't care about the religion. What I care about is the principle. I'm mining for gold nuggets. I'll learn and I'll accept some good stuff from anybody. So here's the quote. Our capacity for development does not end at physical maturity. Our capacity is virtually limitless. Our power to reason is our distinguishing characteristic. Our mind is our basic means of survival. And our ability to think, to learn, to discover new and better ways of dealing with reality, to expand the range of our efficacy, to grow intellectually, is an open door to a road that has no end. That's some good stuff. And I closed on that quote because remember the chapter title that we're talking about this week is Leadership Development Never Ends. It never ends. I've been reading every day since I've discovered this stuff in 2008. I'm going to be reading every day for the rest of my life because I'm never, ever going to learn it all. And a lot of people think, Mack, you know so much. You don't need to learn anymore. I may know a lot more than some people, but I don't know near as much as I need to know. I don't know near as much as I know there is to know. I don't measure myself against other people. If that was the case, I'd just quit reading. Most people haven't even read a leadership book. It's real easy to be much farther ahead of somebody else when you go find people who've not done what you've done. But the key is, I don't measure myself against other people. I measure myself against my potential. And that's what I challenge you to do. Don't worry about how much somebody else does or doesn't know. Worry about your capacity and your potential to grow and learn and develop yourself to a higher level. That's what we should measure ourselves against, our potential. What else could we be doing? That one will put you in gear. Trying to find somebody you're better than and saying, oh, I'm better than everybody else. You're not better than everybody else, but it's easy to find a set of people you think you are better than. But it doesn't even matter. Who are you relative to who you could be? And I'm talking about, on today's episode, who are you as a leader compared to who you could be as a leader? How many leadership books have you read? How often do you read them? How many leadership podcasts or videos have you watched? How many could you have watched? How many could you watch into the future? How many books could you read into the future? How many people are you growing and developing? How many could you be? How many should you be developing? Don't measure yourself against what other people have done or even what you have done. Measure yourself against your potential. What are you capable of doing? What could you and should you be doing? That one will humble you. Talk to you next time.
Make it happen or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mack Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others, now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon, iTunes, and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mack's books, programs, special offers, certifications, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.